I was doing some research recently on the scariest things found in the sea, and there was one monster in particular that called to me. And that monster was the deep sea dragonfish. This spooky looking little fella comes in many shapes and sizes, but the big ones are a measly 26 centimeters, so it might as well just be a scary looking sardine, and I needed to know what it would look like the size of a whale. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boileye Hobby Time. Today I'm making a diorama of a giant deep sea dragonfish about to eat a scuba diver, and due to the size of the fish, I decided to sculpt it from clay. Historically, I haven't had the best success with clay, but recently I realized what my problem was. I was using original Sculpey instead of Super Sculpey. Switching made a world of difference. I usually get really frustrated during the sculpting process, but I actually really enjoyed it this time. So maybe you'll see more hand-sculpted monsters going forward. After covering my aluminum foil snake in a layer of clay, I began detailing it. I didn't recreate any particular dragonfish, but created something that would fit into the larger family tree of the dragonfishes, scientifically known as Stomidae. These mysterious fish live at extreme depths and are known for their bioluminescent barbels, abundance of teeth, and a uniquely hingeable jaw which allows them to eat prey larger than themselves. Many of the things that these fish eat also have some sort of bioluminescent glow to them, so they have a blackout feature in their stomachs to not expose themselves to predators after a large meal, something that I think would come in handy after a meal of LED filament noodles. Looking back, I probably should have made this guy a little more bony and gaunt to sell the deep sea creature look. Something might go wrong and ruin this whole project, so if I have to remake it, I'll remember it for next time. After making the fins, it was time to figure out how I was going to get power to the lights at the end of the barbel. I carved a path in the clay, and I recently bought this awesome tool that bends tiny pipes without crimping them. I can't believe I never thought to get one of these before. Not only can you make smooth 90-degree turns, you can also use it to create larger bends like this one. It's seriously a game changer. Once the bend of the pipe matched the bend of the fish, I glued it to the foil, and then I sutured up the wound. The last addition to the fish was the lower tail fin to help hide the tube, and it was time to make some teeth. This awesome glow-in-the-dark cause clay was a gift from the craftsman, and I thought it would be an excellent use for this stuff to create the fish's teeth. And here's a poor example of me trying to show you the glowing feature. After plucking off and rolling up 50 little balls, I rolled out 50 little wormy dealies, like Adam from north of the border. I made twice as many teeth as I needed, which may come in handy in case I have to remake this entire thing. I propped up my fish while it was baking with some helping hands, and I baked up all of those teeth as well. Unfortunately, I overcooked the teeth, so they came out a little toasty looking, but after they had cooled, I sliced them all in half. For the barbel, I bent another smaller tube and I hid it in some more clay. I then ran a temporary wire through it and the rest of the fish to pull my final wiring back through with later on. After that was in place, I baked the barbel. I then pulled my final wiring through and I connected it to a bluish-white LED. I tested my circuit to make sure everything was working, which it was. I covered the LED in some UV resin to create a more organic-looking light and blend it into the rest of the barbel, which I have now said more times in this video than the rest of my life combined. After protecting the light with some masking tape, I took the fish outside to prime, and then it was time to paint. This diorama is part of the Wild Imaginary West, and if you're not familiar with the Wild Imaginary West, it's basically like the real historical Wild West, but everything is worse. Well, not everything is worse, but the wildlife definitely is, including the deep seas off the coast of California where this bad boy lives. Luckily, fish this size are very rare and stay in the depths. Unfortunately for our diver, though, the spirit of exploration is greater than the fear of the unknown, and his forestall on his boat does not have a range to reach the dragonfish. After installing nearly 50 teeth in the mouth of this precious looking little animal, I took it outside and I gave it a coat of gloss varnish to protect the layer of paint from the resin. After that, it was time to start working on the base. I chose this little gesso board which has a nice hollow area underneath, which I installed a block onto for more support for the fish, and also has enough room underneath for a battery housing. I glued the block in place using some wood glue with the pipe already in the middle, and then I clamped that and I let it dry. I used some UV resin around the base of the pipe to make sure that there was no leakage of the deep pour resin later on. I then test fit the fish, and I'm really happy with how secure this is. The next step was to create the lifeless ocean floor that this fish likes to hang out in. I carved variously sized rocks from XPS foam and I glued them around the base, starting with some large ones and working my way down to a bunch of small ones. I then mixed up a batch of terrain paste from plaster, paint, Mod Podge, and water, and I brushed it over every surface. After everything was covered, I sprinkled on a few different sizes of pebbles and sand, followed by isopropyl alcohol and watered down white glue. I covered the whole thing with one more layer of very fine sand, and I left it to dry. 24 hours later, it was ready to be primed and painted. At these depths, there isn't much plant life, so I added color variation, using some blues and greens on top of the sandy colors that I applied first. After the blues and greens, I deepened the shadows on the rocks using various colors of washes. After the painting was done, I cleaned up my hobby mat, and then I sealed all of the sand with some Mod Podge to help mitigate the possibility of bubbles escaping from it. After the Mod Podge was dry, it was time to put up the acrylic walls that will keep the resin in place while it cures. Before putting the walls up, I knew it would be helpful to have the fish in its position. Once the wires were through, I used some silicone to seal the inside of the pipe, and then I glued the fish in place permanently. I've tried a lot of things to keep these molds from leaking after the resin is in, and by far my best results have come from silicone adhesive. Not only does it prevent leaks better than anything else I've tried, it holds the walls together very sturdily as well. I'd highly recommend it if you ever try it at home, but it does require some extra planning because it takes 24 hours to cure. And while it was curing, it was time to make a diver. I started with this little shirtless guy from a pirate ship model, and after snipping off his feet, I sculpted his wetsuit from green stuff. I recently watched Craftsman's video where he sculpted a 28mm figure from green stuff, and I was very inspired. You should go check it out for yourself. I looked all over the place for an existing plastic figure of a classic scuba diver with the bell helmet, but I couldn't find it anywhere, which was surprising to me, but that's what led me to sculpt my own. I used some styrene tubes that I sliced into little pieces for each of the windows on the helmet, and I added some other details using a tiny silicone sculpting tool. After I was done sculpting, I set that aside and gave the green stuff some time to cure. At this point, 24 hours had gone by since I put the silicone in place, and I wanted to get my first resin layer poured. Because of the likelihood of air getting trapped in the sand or the foam and then being released, I wanted to make sure this first layer of resin was nice and shallow so that those bubbles could get to the top and I could pop them with my butane torch. Once the whole base was covered, I popped those bubbles as they formed, and then I left the first layer of resin to cure for 24 hours. And while that's curing, let's paint the scuba diver. The diver's name is Hans. Hans is on a mission to find an ancient city of gold that is supposed to be lying somewhere at the bottom of the sea. Many others have heard the rumors and attempted to find it, but Hans is the only one with a suit advanced enough to make it, and he's determined to be the one to find it. For the air hose and tether that connects Hans to the surface, I wrapped some thread around some guitar string and superglued them together and into the back of the diver's helmet. After that, he was ready for adventure. And speaking of adventures, it was time to pour the resin. After mixing and pouring the resin, I lowered the diver in and held him in place with my helping hands. I popped the bubbles as they formed, and then I waited for the resin to cure. And while we wait for the resin to cure, I'd like to show you a collection of the monthly art challenge submissions that were sent in by my patrons. The theme of the month, I guess I should say the last 2 months, was Monsters in the Sea, and I think they did a great job. A few of them have channels of their own, which I will link below. Be sure to check those out when you're done here. Thanks again to all the patrons who participated last month. So by this point, you may have noticed that what you see me making is not what was on the thumbnail, and let me show you why. I watched the resin for hours, and it was perfectly clear. Then I went to bed and woke up the next morning, and it was full of tiny bubbles. In spite of all of the things that I did right to prepare this resin project, I did one major thing wrong. I forgot to vacuum out all of the micro bubbles, and because I didn't see them, I didn't think about it. They weren't noticeable at first, but as the resin warmed up during the curing, it caused them to expand, and because there are so many, it essentially ruined the whole project. Well, it's not what I was hoping for. I do feel like a trouble-free resin experience is just around the corner, so in the end, I can still call it good. And because I didn't film the process, I was able to get one more build done just in time for the glamour shots. It's not as big or as detailed as the first one, but it gets the point across. I also decided to give this second project away to a subscriber. All you have to do to enter that giveaway is leave a comment below and be subscribed. If you share the video, let me know and I'll throw in another entry for you. More details will be below. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.